as I just said, a Donald Trump supporter. Dr. Carson, thanks so much for being with us. 2 days now since
Pleasure.
Wisconsin. Donald Trump, the candidate you support, lost in Wisconsin, lost pretty badly. What happened?
Well, you know, in a primary contest, you're going to have some wins and you're going to have some losses. You're going to be up, you're going to be down. What I find so fascinating is with each one of the contests, everybody's saying, oh, this is the big one. This is the one that breaks your back. And then they move on to the next one and say the same thing. You know, this is the way the process goes. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. The key thing is to get your message out there, to learn, to adjust, and to try to provide solutions for the incredible problems that are facing our nation right now.
It's interesting, Dr. Carson, because Donald Trump sure seems to think, though, this next one in New York is the big one. Do you agree?
It is a big one, but, you know, there are a lot of big ones. You know, Florida was a big one. California will be a big one. Texas was a big one. You know, so, you know, I just really personally don't buy into all this is the critical one stuff. I mean, I realize that people in the media have to do that because you got to stir up the excitement. But the fact of the matter is, every single one of these contests is important. And what's fascinating is you look at the dynamics,
the candidates themselves are the ones who say
different
to make
parts
or
of
break.
the country.
Dr. Carson, you said one of the important things is that Mr. Trump learn and adjust after each contest. On the subject of adjustment, a lot of people are suggesting there needs to be changes within the Trump campaign. Are there changes happening right now?
Well, clearly, more people are being hired. There's more concentration on the ground game. There's going to be more concentration on the delegates. You know, the fact of the matter is, there is a game that has to be played. It's unfortunate that you have to play that game, but unless you know how to play it, you're always going to lose. So clearly, he has to make some adjustments, and those are ongoing at this present time.
Corey Lewandowski, the campaign manager, is he still running the show?
What about Corey? I couldn't hear the last part of your question.
Do you think he's still running the show? Do you think he should still be running the show after this controversy he's found himself in?
Well, I think there are a number of people who are involved, and you know, from my contacts with Corey, he's a very intelligent and efficient individual, and I don't see any reason, quite frankly, that we should demonize him. If you can come up with a good reason, I'll listen to it.
Well, look, I mean, he's been charged with misdemeanor assault in Florida. I mean, a lot of people think that is a reason.
Well, I mean, a lot of people have been charged with various things. That doesn't necessarily mean that we need to demonize them. You've probably been charged with something, too. You maybe with a misdemeanor or something. Doesn't mean that you're an evil, horrible person. And, you know, this is part of the problem that we have in America today. Everybody wants to demonize everybody rather than sitting down and having an intelligent discussion about what is going on. Let's look at the facts. And, of course, the reason that we have a court system is that when somebody is charged with something, all the facts can come out and a reasonable conclusion can be reached, hopefully, without a lot of hype.
Well, the other candidates in the race, though, think that while this is circling, the fact that he's charged with misdemeanor assault of a reporter at a campaign event, it wasn't a past grievance, it happened during this campaign. The other candidates think that Corey should step down.
Well, you know, what I would say is we have ISIS and radical Islamic terrorists trying to kill us. We have a financial situation that threatens the foundation of this country. We've got internal strife. These are the things that are important. And if we concentrated more on those, I think we would head in the right direction.
You did say, though, and to move on from Corey, you did say, though, that there is a game going on right now. And by that, I think you mean the delegate race right now, the hunt to pick up delegates. And in order, you know, to become the nominee, you got to win that game and play it well. You were just in North Dakota playing that delegate game. Who's playing the game with the better team right now? Give me an assessment of what the Cruz campaign looked like on the ground, because after North Dakota, people said they were pretty sharp.
Well, there's no question that Senator Cruz has a very effective ground game, has had for several months, and it does provide an advantage. Other people, including Mr. Trump, will have to adjust to that. and begin to catch up. There's no question about it. He does recognize that, and the appropriate adjustments are being made. It's like any organism that is going to survive. If there's a change in the environment, you have to adapt to it or you perish.
What's your role in the organism, to continue with your description? You went to North Dakota to fight for delegates, to plead for delegate support. What's your role in the delegate fight going forward?
Well, you know, my role, quite frankly, you know, is to try to help. You know, I've talked with Donald Trump. We both want to save America. We want to do whatever we can to save America. Some people think it doesn't need saving and that it's doing just fine. But the fact of the matter is, if we look historically at where we've been and how we've risen and where we are now and where we're heading, yes, we absolutely are in trouble. And I think most people would recognize that. So I will do what I can do to help save it. And I happen to believe that of the people who are running, that he's the one who's most likely to do it, because I think that part of our problem is, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, we've had people who are part of the system who can be controlled by the system. And that is why people in Washington, many of them and many of the elites, don't like Donald Trump, because he's not one that they can control.
You say he's the one most likely to do it. Clear that you are endorsing him and working very hard for him across the country. But I want to give you a chance to clarify a statement you made in an interview over the weekend, where you said that, while he might be good, he's not the best, or there are probably people who would be better to run. Let me read you what you said. Nobody believes in the government anymore. Everybody believes that we are weak. We are weak on the world stage. We're not doing things that make sense economically, and he's probably the person who is most likely to do that. Are there better people? Probably. But one of the things that we have to do is broaden the pool from where we select our leaders. Are there better people? Probably. You think there are better people out there to be president than Donald Trump?
I don't think you have to really think about that. It doesn't matter what you're doing. There are better people than me at neurosurgery. There are better people than you being a broadcaster. You know, there are better people at everything. But what we have to do is we have to utilize what we have. We have to make the best of it. We have to improve it to the point where it is capable of being successful. That's what we should do in every field and in every endeavor. That's one of the reasons that I've spent so much time in the educational arena, you know, trying to get the most out of each one of our students, each one of our citizens, because they will contribute to the strength and fabric of our country.
But when you say that there probably are better people out there, did you have someone in mind?
I don't think that that's a useful place to go. But it's an obvious statement.
You brought it up.
Just like I would say, if you drop a brick off of a building, it's going to fall. Obviously, there's always going to be someone who's better at virtually anything. It doesn't mean that you're not good, but of course there are always better people at anything. That should be an obvious statement.
The only reason you brought it up, that's in this interview, that's the only reason we're asking for a clarification, if you had somebody in mind.
Something's really happening here. The sound has deteriorated to the point where I can't hear you.
But
you think I'm making an excuse, but it's true. I can't.
No, are you making an excuse, Doctor? I'm happy to talk a lot louder if need be.
We trust you, Doctor. We were only asking if you had someone in mind. When you said there are better people out there than Donald Trump, probably, do you have people in mind? Or how could he be better?
Well, that second part is a good question. How can any candidate be better? There's always more things to learn. There's always the possibility of trying to learn more about the constituency being everybody, every demographic in our country, and working on trying to allow them to be successful. What kinds of policies do we have that allow everybody to succeed? Not picking one group or another group. And this has been the problem for several decades now. Depending on who is in office, this becomes your favorite group or that becomes your favorite group. The American people should be your favorite group, and the policies that we have should be the ones that favor everybody.
Dr. Ben Carson, I hope you can hear me now. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's continue the conversation.
Always a pleasure.